So, I'm sure everyone watching this has heard of ChatGPT before. It's a natural language processing tool that's driven by AI and machine learning technologies, and it has had a ton of hype surrounding it lately. But one of the caveats to using ChatGPT is that you can't run it locally on your own computer. The only way to use it is to connect to OpenAI's servers. The main reason for this is because of licensing. Despite being developed by an organization named OpenAI, ChatGPT is proprietary software and it's not open source. But even if it was open source, the hardware requirements to run it are pretty staggering and require professional grade GPUs with a ton of VRAM to run it. The full version of ChatGPT would bring even the mighty RTX 4090 to its knees because of its massive memory requirements. But something that many people might not know is that there's quite a few open source alternatives that are based on ChatGPT. These models are typically much smaller with their memory requirements and are able to run on consumer grade hardware. But setting them up isn't so straightforward unless you know what you're doing, at least until recently, that is. GPT4ALL is an open source alternative that's extremely simple to get set up and running, and it's available for Windows, Mac, and Linux. It's also extremely lightweight and does not require a GPU to run it. Any computer with a quad-core CPU and at least 8 gigabytes of RAM should be able to run it just fine, which means you can now have your own personal ChatGPT running directly from a laptop. Now, GPT-4all obviously won't be as accurate as the full-blown ChatGPT, but it's kinda shocking how good it is considering its hardware requirements are so low. The developers were able to do this by applying some heavy optimizations and fine-tuning the algorithm, and they did an extremely good job with it. I'm really impressed at how well it works, and it can do most of the same things that ChatGPT can do, including helping generate ideas for projects you're working on, solving math problems, writing lyrics for a song, writing and debugging Python functions, and much more. Now, to be clear, I'm not one of those people who believes AI chatbots are actually intelligent and will someday take over the world or anything like that, because the reality is they don't possess any intelligence. But I do think that they can be extremely useful for certain applications, and that this technology will continue to become more mainstream. So with that said, let's now go over how to install GPT4all. The link to this GitHub repo is in the video description. I'll be demonstrating this on a Linux distro, but the process is very similar on Mac and Windows. Now there's actually a few different methods of installing it, so let's start with the most straightforward one. This method will install to your computer as a regular application and will provide you with a nice looking UI as well. Simply download the appropriate version for your computer, open up the file, and follow the directions to install it. By the way, even though it says Ubuntu here, this method will still work on any Linux distro. Also, this method was just released the other day and hasn't been signed by Windows or Apple yet, so you might see a security warning if you're installing on those operating systems. But I assure you, this isn't a virus and doesn't pose a threat. So first download the appropriate installer, then double-click the downloaded file and click Next through the installer prompts. It will begin downloading the actual model, which is about 3 gigabytes, so it might take a while to finish. Once it's done, it should have installed a shortcut on your desktop, or you can also just search for it from the start menu like this. The interface looks pretty nice and is very straightforward to use. Let's test it out by first asking a trick question. Who's more intelligent, you or ChatGPT? You'll probably notice that it's a bit slow to respond. That's because it's running on the CPU, which is considerably slower than models that run on a GPU. If you're curious how to get something like this running on a GPU, then be sure to subscribe to the channel and stay tuned. But even so, this version is fast enough that it's still very usable, and it's actually much faster than any other model when running on a CPU. As far as accuracy goes, I'd say its responses are pretty good. It addressed the question directly and provided an answer that makes sense. Now let's take a look at the original method of running GPT4ALL. Scroll down to this section and follow these instructions. First, download this file here. You can use the direct link or download it with the torrent, which should be a lot faster. Its size is several gigabytes, so it might take a while. Next, clone the repository by typing git clone followed by the link to this repo, or you can just go to the top of the page and download the repo as a zip file. Once the first file is done downloading, move it into the chat folder inside the repo you just downloaded. Now open a terminal inside the main folder and enter the appropriate command for your OS. I'm using Linux, so I'll copy and paste this command. It will take a few seconds to load. This version should be exactly the same as the first method, except you don't have a fancy UI to go along with it. Let's just ask it a simple question that has a straightforward answer this time. And that's actually not correct. According to Google, Theodore Roosevelt was the 26th president of the United States. But I guess it was pretty close, right? Well, I guess they have a bit of work to do, but overall it's still pretty good. Now, if you spend a lot of time with this, you might notice that it refuses to answer certain questions. That's because there's a filter that prevents it from saying certain things that some people might find to be offensive or harmful. That's why there's also an unfiltered model available that has less restrictions in what it can say. You can download it here, and again, you'll simply place this in the chat folder like we did with the previous model, and then run this command instead. Now moving on down the page, we'll also see that there's Python bindings available too. This allows GPT4ALL to run in your own custom Python programs, which opens up the door to a ton of possibilities. But I'll be coming back to this in a future video. You'll also see a section here for running it on a GPU, but again, this isn't very straightforward and requires more effort to get working. I'm actually planning to spend a lot more time with AI and machine learning tools, and we'll be making tutorials how to run all sorts of different models. You can see here there's a lot of different applications that are being developed with AI and machine learning. Some examples are text-to-image and video, object detection and video classification, text-to-speech, automatic speech recognition, and much more. These are extremely powerful tools that are all open source, which means anyone can utilize them. And by the way, AMD GPUs are perfectly capable of running these models as well, not just NVIDIA cards. I've successfully run a handful of these models on my RX 6700 XT, and I'll be making detailed step-by-step guides going over how I did it very soon. I'll also be doing separate guides showing how to get them set up with NVIDIA cards as well. But that wraps up everything I wanted to go over for today. I just wanted to introduce this app to you guys since I think it's a really convenient way to get a competent chatbot running locally on your own hardware, and it serves as a good introduction to the tutorials I'll be doing soon. Like I just said, I'm planning to explore a lot more AI tools and will be showing how to incorporate them into your own projects, such as this custom designed robot that I built a few years ago that takes advantage of computer vision and object detection models. Not only will I be doing programming tutorials on these topics, but I will also be covering other engineering concepts such as circuits and mechanics as well. So be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already if you're interested in following along with these projects. Also be sure to give this video a like if you enjoyed it or found it useful. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.